Hello. Happy to see so many people interested in this webinar. My name is Frank Emil Moen. I'm the CEO of Energy Innovation. So Energy Innovation is a partner in the T-Shore project, Erasmus Plus projects about technical skills for harmonized offshore renewable energies, where we have a regional COVI, Center of Vocational Excellence, for offshore wind in Norway. So this webinar is arranged connected to this. The topic for today's webinar is the regulatory framework for HSE with experience from UK and also the status update from the work that the Norwegian government through Havtil are doing on the regulatory framework for offshore wind in Norway. So this webinar is conducted in collaboration with ARMSA Academy UK. Energy Innovation and ARMSA Academy has just signed an agreement to collaborate on courses that will be conducted through ARMSA, also for participants in Norway and in other countries as well, through the network that we have. So I will just give the word now to the CEO of ARMSA Academy, Rakesh. And there we have Torleif also. We could hear you, Torleif. That's good. The sound is working. Great. Rakesh, you are most welcome. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Frank. And it's indeed a huge pleasure to be working with the Norwegian Circle for the first time in a long time. And our gratitude goes out to Energy Innovation for making this all possible. So thank you to you and your team, Frank. I also believe that I have a few minutes to introduce ARMSA Academy for the benefit of the Norwegian market. So I've taken advantage of the opportunity to put together a slide. And for those of you who have watched Frank's presentations before, I tried to take up the mantle to see how many various logos I could get onto one slide, and I failed miserably, as you will see. So who is ARMSA Academy and what do we do? ARMSA Academy is a management skills development practice. We're based out of Manchester in the UK. What our unique proposition to the market is that we use our research and know-how through the contentious and non-contentious work we have historically delivered to high-growth offshore wind farms that enables them to place profitability and safety on the same side of the table and ensure that everybody from the boardroom through to the shop floor understands how safety and profitability can be delivered as outcomes of good, informed management decision-making. We work with several companies in the UK and around the world in order to be able to do this. And
sorry, a question. Are you presenting, we only see one slide?
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering.
Yes, Frank, it is only one slide, I do promise. Yeah, it's just that the one slide's building up. So we work with a number of companies around the world, here in the UK as well as across in APAC, and work with developers, asset owners, from the development phase all the way through to operations maintenance during warranty and post-warranty. Here are some of the examples of the clients that we work with. We're particularly pleased to be working with managers across these organizations who use our programs and digital technologies to leverage performance from their regulatory obligations and through systemic action. We've been developing Managing Safely for Wind Power since 2010, which is now on its 9th edition. It's been delivered to over 2,000 people in 40 countries. And our network is growing and growing really well. In fact, it began with Wind Energy Ireland way back in 2013, who fund our programs through their local SkillNet scheme. The Global Solar Council recognized the importance of what we do in terms of building informed decision-making capability and have adopted our programs throughout their 6,000 member network across the world. We're members of Renewable UK, and of course, really proud to have signed the agreement with Energy Innovation last week at the conference. We are looking forward to delivering our IOSH accredited programs in Norway. Thank you very much, Frank. So I'll take the opportunity to introduce our first speaker. And our first speaker for today is the inimitable Paul Bradley. Paul has 28 years of working as experience working as a mechanical engineer in the UK major hazard industry. Paul joined the HSE, which is the UK's regulator for offshore wind, in 2008 as HM Principal Inspector of Mechanical Engineering in the hazardous industry sector. Paul is HSE's Energy Division Head of Operations and part of Energy Division Senior Leadership Team, with overall responsibility for the wind and marine energy sector, diving operations, mines and quarries, offshore and onshore oil and gas installations, and well engineering operations. The HSE, as I said before, is the UK's independent health and safety regulator. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Rakesh, and thank you, Frank, for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. Just bear with me one moment while I share my screen. Hopefully, you'll be able to see my presentation very shortly. Can you see that, Rakesh? Okay. Yep.
I'll see that, Paul. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try not to take too long on the presentation because these things can expand to fill the time available, and conscious that I'd like to leave plenty of time for questions to pick up the specific things that people want to talk about and not necessarily what I want to provide. So here I'm going to just briefly go through the UK's regulatory framework. Here are the topic areas that I'll cover, and in particular you'll see that I'll give the energy current position, and we've just had an announcement today by the new government on the latest position in terms of renewable energy. A brief overview of our regulatory framework for offshore wind, what the primary legislation is, what the secondary legislation is, our strategic approach towards offshore wind, in particular stakeholder engagement, or how we ensure compliance and promote best practices in the industry. Take you through a few of the lessons that we've learned through that process of developing our regulation and our regulatory approach and strategic approach, and some of the lessons that we've learned from other sectors, including oil and gas. And then a little bit about what our current and future plans are for interventions in the offshore wind sector, i.e. how we regulate, what we do, and how we regulate. Bear with me one moment, the slide's not moving on. There we go. Don't know what's happening there, but the slide wasn't moving on. So as you can see, as of to date, we've got 2024 statistics for wind energy combined. So in terms of onshore turbines, and these come from Renewable UK, you can access these through the link on the slides. In terms of installed onshore turbines, there's some 9.142 operational projects of gigawatts, so quite a significant amount of power, installed power there. In terms of offshore turbines, there are 14.7 gigawatts, so a combined amount of almost 30.5 gigawatts of installed power operational capacity. 15 from the onshore sector, which is starting to increase, and 14.7 from the offshore sector, which is definitely increasing at a phenomenal rate. And as of today, the government's announced a further 9.6 gigawatts of renewable energy. Not all of that is offshore wind turbines. There is a mix of that balance. So things are moving quite significantly. For some strange reason, the slides aren't advancing. Let me see if I can move it that way. There we go. So our primary legislation is born out of a major incident back in 1966, which was actually the engulfment of the Aberfan village following mining tipping operations. And that led to a review of the legislation that we had at that time, and what's known as the Health and Safety at Work Act, which was a goal-setting piece of legislation which sets out the duties of those that employed people, what their activities were or are, and how that impacts not only the workforce but others associated with their work activities as well. It was following the review by Lord Robens. The legislation was brought into effect in 1974, but in 2013, the Health and Safety at Work Act was amended via the Application Outside Great Britain order to extend the provisions to include all of the things that you see there: offshore installations and the activities in connection with them, wells and activities in connection with wells, pipelines, mining activities, gas unloading, storage and recovery, and then energy production from water or wind. So this application was extended in 2013. Underground coal gasification and various other activities within the territorial sea. So the specified offshore areas cover external waters, which means the territorial sea and designated areas. And just to show you what that means in terms of the area around the UK continental shelf, you can see the hatch sections from the North Sea Transition Authority shows what that means in terms of the UK continental shelf. So the area outside Great Britain order applies to sections 1 to 59 and 80 to 82 of the provisions of the Health and Safety at Work Act. And the territorial sea and the designated areas adjacent to are the area shown and within 12 miles of the coastline as well. Some of the subordinate legislation that is utilised within wind turbines, for example, and wind development, it was considered at the time, should we adopt what is done for the oil and gas legislation, which was the safety case regulations. And that was something that was thought long and hard about, but actually already in place, we had the construction and design and management regulations, and it's a little bit of a misnomer because it also covers activities on structures as well. And in the AGBO, as we refer to it in 2013, the scope of the regulations for construction CDM regulations was brought into effect through 2013. CDM was updated to include those activities, and therefore it set out all of the different aspects of managing projects from design through construction, through operation, through maintenance, and through to decommissioning or any upgrades of the system. So in other words, it is a cradle to grave set of regulations with defined responsibilities for different duty holders within the life cycle of any construction of buildings or structures associated with the CDM regulations. And these regulations apply to any project that are over 30 days of length or extend beyond 20 weeks, or in summation, anything more than 500 person days of activity. And the reason for this goal setting legislation is guidance and prescriptive regulations cannot keep pace with innovation and technology. So every time a new piece of technology comes into being, any prescriptive regulation needs to be changed, updated, and the decision was taken that the construction design and management regulations would be most appropriate and fit for purpose for dealing with wind turbines and offshore wind in particular, as well as onshore wind. And the reason for that is once you've built something, it's difficult then to keep abreast of the technology as it comes in, but you've got an ongoing duty to consider what technology is available and how you might adopt that into your operations as they currently stand. So once something's been designed, it needs to keep abreast of the technology as far as it can, dependent on what the costs and the burdens of doing that. So it's a balanced risk versus cost, or what we refer to as low as reasonably practicable in terms of health and safety management. So the ownership of health and safety is set out within the CDM regulations. There are various duties on various duty holders. As you might imagine, there's the client, i.e. those that commission the piece of work. There are principal designers, there are principal contractors, there are contractors, there are the workforce and other interested persons that all have duties set out within the CDM regulations. And one of the biggest things to do is to understand the duties of all of those different parties and include the workforce in the design and the construction and the operation and the maintenance phases of all of this activity. And it is meant to be proportionate regulation. So it's not looking for best practice, it's looking for good practice, reasonable practice. What is it reasonable to do in different applications, weighing up the time, trouble, effort, and costs of what it takes to build and operate and maintain any installation. Again, the general principles of prevention in terms of CDM is set out, and the principles that the duty holders should use in their approach to identifying measures to take control of the risks to health and safety in any particular project, given these general principles. That is, avoiding risks where it's possible and where they can't be avoided, making sure they're evaluated so that the risks are proportionately controlled and deal with them at source wherever appropriate. So CDM of 2015 requires designers, principal contractors and contractors to take account of the principles in carrying out their duty. So avoiding risks where they can, where they can't, making sure that suitable control measures are put in place to control them at source. In terms of the strategic approach that we've undertaken for offshore wind, our strategic approach is to gain the leverage of the wider engagement with all of the interested stakeholders. Now that starts at home. In terms of G+ and Safety On, they are the key trade associations, key trade bodies that we deal with on a fairly frequent basis. We meet every 6 weeks typically to talk about the topics that we have between us, and we look towards resolving issues and working together in terms of the best fit for solutions to any problems that we have, either from a regulatory perspective or from an operational or design perspective. You can see I've included a list of different people: Renewable UK, Catapult, OE UK. So OE UK are the Offshore Energy UK. formerly Oil and Gas UK, and they've moved their name across to transition into the renewable energy space as we continue to operate the oil and gas phase and move into transitional projects that we are undertaking, including electrification of the oil and gas installations where it's appropriate, and other supplies to those installations to optimize the capacity for UK PLC. Obviously, we work with the Global Wind Organization, again, key for training and competence in the aspects of the work that we do and how we regulate. We've got the offshore transmission operators as well, so substations and other operations along those lines. We gain knowledge from our own internal regulators and also dealing with international regulators. So we share lessons learned, share knowledge, share our experiences where it's appropriate. And I know I've personally been on different presentations with different regulators from all over the world where we've shared our experiences and activities, and we learn from each other as best we can. Not one person has got all the knowledge, and we've got a far greater leverage of dealing with the activities that we all face, particularly as the technologies move on at such a rapid space. In the UK, we've probably dealt with a lot of the easier type of installations, and we're now moving into the next phases of rapid expanse, bigger and more powerful and more efficient turbines, floating wind technology, and substations and power centers that will really start to take off in a big way. Hybrid type installations where we might be using electrolysis and generating hydrogen in the future. Who knows what that might bring? But also we have to deal with our own domestic issues as well. So we've got our trades unions. We meet with the trades unions on a periodic basis to make sure that they're kept abreast of the activities that we're undertaking. We give them the forum to discuss any concerns that we have, that they have for us to take up, because we are we act on behalf of the HSE as regulators, as the independent regulator, but clearly the workforce need to be involved, as do the operators and all of the interested persons. We deal with suppliers, designers, consultants to try and establish what we are looking for in terms of as low as is reasonably practicable, what are the measures that can be taken. And we also help where we can in offering our specialist support, because we've got specialist engineers in oil and gas that we've transitioned into renewables. They still work across both spaces of the operations. And then clearly we have to work with the training organisations and academies as well to ensure that we've got a competent workforce and we can build for the future. So a lot of work in terms of stakeholder engagement. That's our strategic approach. We want to be an enabling regulator. We don't want to stand in the way of innovation. We don't want to stifle people, but we do want to make sure that things are done safely by a competent workforce, by responsible duty holders, and do what's best for the UK PLC and share that knowledge and experience with other regulators and other operators as well. Some of the lessons that we've learned within the UK continental shelf. I've talked about transition. It really has been a rapid transition over the last probably 10 years from a low baseline, low starting point. We've had to upskill our own teams. We've had to bring in regulators from elsewhere, including from the oil and gas sector. We've had to develop our specialist knowledge and recruit people into the inspection regime. We've still got quite a small team, but we do engage at all phases of the projects. The rate of growth has been significant, and I've already described today that from a 30 gigawatt baseline, we should be up in the regions of 50 plus gigawatts by 2030 if things continue on the same track, and the investment is there, a commitment from government to support contracts for differences and other aspects such as GB energy, the formation of that. And we've yet to learn what that completely means for ourselves and for others as part of that. We also have to keep abreast of new innovation. You know, there are new technologies coming all the time. I've covered that goal setting legislation it is written in that way to enable us to work on guidance with the trade associations, because we can appropriately update that legislation, we can update the guidance in a much more timely fashion. Typically every 3 to 5 years, we look for guidance to be updated, or when new technologies coming in. The existing infrastructure, well, it's now been in some of it a while. Some of it will be renewed with more capability. You know, as the technology has advanced, as things have got better, more efficient, some of the existing infrastructure will be replaced by new infrastructure. That brings new challenges, such as the lifting marine operations within existing structures. Some of the risks are quite new to us. You know, these are really significant lifts. We've seen some fantastic lifts, some new vessels coming into the location, new methods of getting our workforce out to the locations, which has been rightly advocated by the trade associations as well, in conjunction with ourselves. So we've gone from basket transfers, for example, to crew transfer vessels and other operations of that. So really significant improvements in the way that we do things. The lessons that we've learned have come from incident analysis. So we try and prevent accidents, but we do learn lessons the hard way. We have things happen to us that sometimes are foreseeable, sometimes not. We do learn those, and I'll show you probably on the last slide some of the statistics that helps us target where we look. I have talked about learning and solving problems together. No one of us has all the solutions. So it's only right that we all work together in collaboration and share all the problems that we have. And I don't mean the financial aspects, I mean the safety aspects and the technological aspects of our operations. And that collaboration, communication and coordination of activities enables us to learn a lot of lessons. And we do keep things under continuous review, not only for new technologies, but we also make sure that the legislative framework, the guidance framework, is kept up to date. And if things do advance at such a way that, for example, construction design and management regulations didn't remain fit for purpose, which I believe that they do, then we would seek to change legislation if we needed to. There are specific risks, for example, in oil and gas that are definitive major accident hazard scenarios. If something goes wrong on an oil and gas platform, there can be a tremendous loss of life. And that is true in certain aspects of some of the work that we do in terms of offshore wind. If we drop one of these turbines, nacelles, sink something in the North Sea in the wrong circumstances, again, we can suffer major losses of life, and we don't want that. But for the majority of the time when we are dealing with these operations, design, construction's the more challenging aspects, and dismantling are usually the more challenging aspects of what we do. Operations and maintenance is typically business as usual, but there are things that we need to learn lessons from, and I'll perhaps cover a few of those. So what the regulatory approach for ourselves is to intervene at different project phases. You may be able to see in this graph that these are the number of high potential incidents seen in 2023, and these are provided by G+, and these are all offshore high potential. So these are not just UK. And you can see that by far the largest number of high potential incidents in 2023 was during the construction phases, followed by the operational phase and some work in the development site phase. So you can see on the bottom part of that graph, lifting operations in 2022 and lifting operations in 2023. Even though there's an increase in activity, there's a reduction in the number of lifting operation incidents. In terms of transfers from vessels, there's been a slight uptick, but there's been a lot more activity in terms of vessel transfer. And again, down on vessel operations, including jackups and barges, down again from 22 to 23, the number of incidents. Working at height, 16 down to 11. Electrical systems, working with electrical systems are 22 in 22 and 11 in 23. Lots of those in the operational phase. So you can see the makeup of lifting operations in the construction phase, transfer in the construction phase, typically vessel operations in and around that activity as well. Working at height, electrical systems tend to be more in the operational phase. So we target these different phases, and to try and prevent these, we get the designers to encompass the lessons that we learn from these different operations into their designs. And we share that with G+ and Safety On for the onshore aspects and others. And then we inspect wherever it's appropriate in different parts of projects, particularly the larger projects with these really big lifts, these high number of transfers, and where any incidents happen, we investigate those. So we look at the design concepts and philosophies, focusing on the construction activity. We look at strategic topics, which I've just described some of those: lifting operations, working at height, transfers from vessels, working in close proximity to electricity. We also look at other connected activities, so the substations, any other things like oil and gas that we might be encroaching in onto, and test some of the operational activities. Maintenance is starting to feature in some of the events that we see. Again, arc flashes has been quite a topic, and we've done a piece of work quite recently with G+ and Safety On in addressing those circumstances. We expect there to be quite a few more modifications and upgrades as the sites start to age and the efficiency starts to wane and newer technologies pick up. We do learn from incidents and investigations, and there will be some decommissioning, not hopefully in the near future, but currently we do see that things have been designed to a certain life extent. As the assets get older, there'll be cases to made to either extend the life or to decommission some of the aspects and replace where it's appropriate. And decommissioning takes you back into that reverse of the construction site phase where you've got an increase in hazardous activity. That was a quick run through our regulator.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. You are still, was you frozen? Did we lose you? Are you there, Paul?
I think he might have frozen, Tuli. I mean,
Yes.
Frank.
Okay, yeah. Well, I put some questions in the chat. We will come back to that, I think, after Torleif has had his presentation. Torleif Husebø, he's representing Havtil, what you call in Norwegian, the Norwegian Ocean Industry Authority. And as we are well aware of, they are working with the framework for the regulation of offshore wind in Norway as we speak. So happy to have you here, Torleif. So please start your presentation.
First, check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
That's
can.
good. Major technical
good.
issues there, and still try. Not everything is resolved. I think I will go for this one. Do you see anything now?
Yes, we see the presentation. Looks good.
Yeah, I will use this mode because I had some issues with this screen mode.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation, and also Paul for interesting overview of HSE's work. I will try to give some rather brief words about the regulation we are working on, as Frank mentioned. First of all, just a few words on Havtil, or the Norwegian Ocean Industry Authority, and then go to the process we are in. Mostly talk about the process itself, the principles for the regulation, and also some words about where we are currently and what we are doing now. So, Havtil, we are a government supervisory agency reporting to the Ministry of Energy. There was a change in early this year, I think it was, yes. And that was primarily due to the focus on global policies and the need for more focus on safe energy transport to Europe, that we were moved from the Ministry of Labour to the Ministry of Energy. So we are working on safety, working environment, and also on emergency preparedness and security. The two last parts are specific for the petroleum operation, both offshore and also on the land-based, onshore-based plants we have in Norway. For renewable energy production, CO2 transport and storage, and mineral operations on seabed, it's only safety and working environment. And then safety is related, first of all, to safety for the people working in industry. Like, for instance, on renewable energy production, it's not energy safety. That is another authority's responsibility. We are about 180 employees in Havtil. And then a few words about offshore wind development in Norway. As Paul mentioned, they are now producing a total of around 30 gigawatt combined offshore and onshore. That is quite similar to the amount of hydro energy that is produced in Norway today onshore. And also similar to the goal that the government has put up for 30 gigawatt by 2040 of offshore wind. And the map on the right side there is illustrating the areas that are identified as potential areas. So there's a number of areas, and currently it's there is only one allocated, which is on the southern part of the continental shelf. Which was is Ventyr that has got that development, so that will be exciting. Currently, we are miniature compared to UK of offshore wind. There is only one actual offshore wind installation or farm, which is Hywind Tampen, Equinor's installation out in the North Sea. But that is, regulatory speaking, a petroleum activity. It's not a renewable energy activity. So in that case, we utilized that field is developed according to the petroleum regulation. But that is also a functional set of rules, where we, in principle, what we did there was, of course, to adjust it according to the risk, and also to replace the petroleum standards with relevant offshore wind standards. So that kind of made the way for that installation, and at least according to Equinor, it's built just as they would have built another similar plant on, related to renewable wind. So that's an interesting experience. So the process so far, we got the responsibility as a regulator for safety and working environment for offshore renewables in 2020, in the last part of 2020. And we started our formal process with what we call the regulatory forum. I will come back to that in the next slide, also in 2020. And we, as is the process in Norway when developing rules, we presented an official study in Norwegian utredning that is covering the background and the scope of the regulation in 2021. And we had an internal hearing in regulatory forum in 2023, worked on the comments, and then a public hearing in the start of this year. Actually, it started a little late last year, I think. And we are currently processing the comments, and the plan is to put the rules into force during next year. That is the current plan, so to say. Next slide there. So the work here, the regulatory forum, which is that green, bluish box on the right-hand side. Regulatory forum is a group consisting of representatives from the employers associations like Offshore Norway and others, and representatives from the employees associations, the work unions in principle, the major ones at least, and the authorities, us, Maritime Authority, and also the ministry is acting as an observer. So the point there that is to have this common approach to not necessarily develop rules, but at least to influence the development of the rules. That Regelverksforum has been in use in the petroleum industry since around the year 2000, and it has been kind of developed to kind of also include offshore renewables during this process we are in now. So there have new relevant companies or organizations, is the correct word, has entered that forum. This also means that the thing takes time because there is a lot of back and forth in such processes. So also this slide here is a slide I've used several times, but when we started the work in 2020, of course we had a baseline which we had been working on, because for those who have a good or remember a lot of old stuff, remembers that in between 2000 and 2007-8, there was a period where there was actually giving concessions for offshore wind in Norway, shore-based or close to shore. So we started actually back in that time period to work with offshore wind. But we also had a work with the North Sea Energy Group, which is an authority group under the hat of EU in before 2020, 2015 to 18, I think it was, where we gained a lot of experience from international offshore wind, how to regulate, how not to regulate. The HSE has been a major kind of influencing part in that process. Of course, we also worked with the onshore-based wind in Norway, and especially the authorities in Norway regulating safety and working environment in onshore wind, and learned a lot about how they regulate and how they wish they had regulated it. And then for the petroleum, we are historically a petroleum authority, focused on that, and now we need to have two thoughts in our head at one time. Can be difficult, but seen from our perspective, there are some elements. I will also come back to that in a later slide, but mainly it's the safety culture, the approach to safety and risk management principles that we have kind of adopted mostly. And of course, it has an influence on how how things are worded, but it's all scaled, at least as we see it, scaled to the risk, as also Paul was mentioning, that it's not necessarily the best, but reasonable. That is a key word. So the public hearing, Frank, when he invited me to speak, he also had some leading points, of course, as Frank always does. So what about the public hearing, the principal comments? So again, there was a lot of comments. They were for different parties, and they are, of course, conflicting, as comments are. But the main issues that we are working on is the, you can say, called the scope of the regulation. So, for instance, that we have put focus on, as Paul also mentioned, focus on regulating the approach to safety management or risk management. Traditionally in Norway on onshore, the internal control regulation is bluntly speaking, stating that you need to have a system for managing safety, and that should be documented. So very easily spoken. But what we have focused on is then to have an approach to safety management, which is more specific, and specifically in regards to identify risk, to evaluate the risk, and have the necessary controls in place with the focus on accident prevention. That is basically the key words that we have focused on in our work, and there are different opinions on that. That's not a big surprise, so to say. Working hours is, of course, a difficult topic. We are setting the outer framework, and the parties need to agree on the details, but it's a difficult topic. And then there's a discussions, especially in the regulator forum, in regards to the relevance of the Offshore Energy Act, specifically Section 5.1, which is regulating safety. I will show that. If that is applicable for safety and electrical installations. That is a principal matter. This is the way we have done it in the petroleum industry for nearly 50 years, offshore, and some parts of the industry would like to adopt the same approach as we have on a land-based industry, where they have a law which is called supervisory law in roughly translation in English, that should be applicable. We are in a stance where our approach is to say that Section 5.1 in the Offshore Energy Act is sufficient, as the Section 9 in the Petroleum Act is sufficient for the petroleum industry, so to say. But again, we have to see what the end result will be. The main principle for the regulation for safety and working environment is that the requirements are mostly goal-oriented or functional, and with guidance which accompanies that, which kind of gives a description on how to satisfy the goals. And that is, to as extent far as possible, we utilize relevant standards from the offshore wind or offshore renewable industry. And there are a number of those, both from IEC, ISO, and the companies like DNV and so forth, which are applicable to that. And I think, as HSE mentioned, that's the way forward in most regulations, where you need to kind of fender off an industry that is in a constant development. So also we have not referenced the G+ and GWO as specifically, but of course they have a lot of good documentations, more on best practices that could be applicable, and also that the industry work together to promote those in regards to allocate time and also to motivate to preventive action, as Paul mentioned. I mentioned the regulatory forum, and then we have had discussions with industry organizations and also with national and international authorities. I mentioned HSE, SSM in Holland, then obviously in Denmark, and also now lately through this International Regulator Forum, which started also out as a petroleum forum, which is now developed into also covering renewables, where we sit together with HSE. We have had a lot of work or cooperation with NOPSEMA in Australia. They are in principle in the same phase as we are, and they see a lot of the same issues as we have, and also that their approach is quite, in principle, similar to what we have, but of course it's adapted to the Australian legislation. BSEE in the US, and where we also see the same trend that they are kind of strengthening up the safety management issues, or the safety management part of the regulation is being strengthening. And also now with Canada, which are a little bit in the starting blocks, so to say. This is the Offshore Energy Act, and it's, the heading there is high HSE standards versus cost and scope of regulations. That was a leading line I got from Frank. So the Offshore Energy Act 5.1 is quite simple to read. Construction, operation, decommissioning of energy facility pursuant to this law shall be carried out in such a way that a high level of safety can be maintained and developed in line with the technological advancements. Basically a copy of what we have for the petroleum industry. And also the Minister of Energy has stated that the offshore wind industry in Norway should be a world leading in safety, which is the same formulation as has been for the petroleum industry for a number of years. What this actually means is another question, but it at least gives us some leeway in the direction of this is an industry that puts safety high, but of course it should put safety in the right position in regards to all the other aspects, operational, technological, and so forth, that are applicable. The same way as I'm very kind of familiar with the wording that Paul mentioned, and that approach they have is, I think it's quite similar to what we have, even though we regulate it a little bit differently in where things are in rules or things are in guidelines. And what we see is that at least our suggested rules are quite in line with the experience we have from other relevant authorities. But again, it's an interesting question. And the part where we go into the comments specifically, there are relatively few comments that kind of pinpoints cost as a direct consequence of the requirements. Most are put attention on the possible gray areas between regulators and how that can influence the cost. And also some of the comments are aligned in regarding, or not aligned, but they are kind of targeting the relevance of safety regulations in relation to the risk level, and they are afraid that we as an authority will impose a more major action approach on this sector, as we have done on the petroleum sector for 50 years. And even though the regulations are quite clear in that the regulations need to be in a relevant position in accordance to the risk. And then the last key I got from Frank was experience on the petroleum industry. Is that relevant? Our view is, of course, yes, it's relevant. And also in the documents that kind of led up to more or less the process we are in now, that states that comparable or compared to renewable energy production on land, the establishment of renewable energy production at sea entails new challenges related to safety, and that's something we all know. On the other hand, the establishment and operation of large installation will have many similarities with the oil and gas industry. And that was basically a part of the reasoning behind that Havtil was selected as a safety and working environment authority. Of course, a lot of differences, but again, we have to be specific and targeted against the specific risks in the offshore renewable industry. Yeah, I mentioned Hywind Tampen. That was a very interesting project for us, a lot of learning points, and it kind of demonstrated also that this functional or goal-oriented approach has a lot of strengths, as HSE has demonstrated within renewables, and also that has been demonstrated within petroleum for many, many years. Yeah, that was my last slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Torleif. Very interesting. And I see that we have limited time to actually discuss more topics, but you have partly actually already answered some of my questions, and Rakesh has also a couple of questions. But first, I'm not sure that we have lost Paul. I see that he is operating in the chat, or are you there, Paul?
I'm still here, yes.
Yeah,
oh, okay, I can see you.
He is moving.
Good, okay, I can't see you for some reason, strange. Yeah, okay, so you have already answered in the chat some of the questions. I just had one question regarding if you compare the situation in oil and gas, we have a lot of historical data for accidents. With the accidents that we have seen in offshore wind, do you have any comments to that aspect and the development of that?
I have, yes. In terms of oil and gas, the statistics are coming down. We still see things like hydrocarbon releases, but they are coming down as the assets are getting older. You know, some of them are 40 plus years old. The integrity of them is decreasing. So we need to keep on top of the maintenance there. So there's a lot of work being done in the oil and gas sector to promote the life. And on the other hand, in the renewable sector, we're seeing increased activity, greater lifts, greater activity in terms of higher risk activities. But I think with the work that we've put in up front in the way that we've approached this with the stakeholders, with the operators, with the trade bodies, with the workforce, it's paying dividends. We're seeing the statistics, the incidents are coming down. I showed you the high potential ones using mainly UK statistics, but some global statistics in there as well. From last year to this year, there have been certain areas that have come down. Some operations have gone up, but we do focus in on those to make sure that we're learning the lessons from the incidents and we're working together collaboratively to try and prevent. As Torleif said, prevention is much better than learning incidents the hard way.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Torleif, a question for you regarding is the last one on in the chat when it comes to certifications for personnel working in the Norwegian offshore wind farm versus a wind farm in UK or Germany or elsewhere. Will there be specific requirements for national certification to be allowed to operate in Norway? For example, NS 9600 for rope access, GWO specific training, electrical installation, certification, etc. and likewise. Could you give a comment on that?
Yeah, it's a two-part answer to that. That in our suggested rules, we have a very kind of functional, goal-oriented approach to that. That the responsible party or the party that operates the wind farm should have the people who work for them should have the necessary competence in order to handle hazards and also emergency preparedness situations. That's the rule in very roughly speaking. And then on the guideline, it doesn't state GWO or G+, but it kind of states the functions like basic safety, rescue and survival training, working in heights and so forth, first aid and fire safety. So the key elements. And of course, then the second part of the question is basically how the industry work together in order to develop this, and that the industry work together in an organization like G+ and GWO, so you get a common approach to. Actually, the third part of the question is how do you kind of allow people to go from, say, UK to Norway and vice versa? And we have a lot of history on that. And that is basically to align rules or align the guidelines is more to be more correct, so that the training is in principle the same either in UK, Holland, Denmark, Norway, and so forth. So you allow for that, but the rules, as we say, they doesn't state that you should open up for this and that to cross border it, but just lay the framework for that to be kind of approach, and also that, like we know through IRF, have started this more close cooperation between the relevant authorities globally, and including North Sea, is also a function there is to learn from each other and also to discuss issues related to training and competency, so we can participate in that process to align the practical parts, so to say.
Yeah.
The only exception here in Norway is which is the discussion is also back to the point on electrical, which is where there are divided opinions, so to say. Yeah.
Where you haven't finally concluded, as I understood, yet?
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah. You haven't finally concluded yet?
No. It's a yeah, framhalsåg, yeah.
Yeah.
A continuous, okay. It's continuing. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Rakesh, please feel free to give your comments. You have a long experience in holding management courses for HSE regulations cross nations. So I guess you could have a 30 minutes talk about the topic, but please give some short. I know that we are run over time, but I talked with you upfront that there is a possibility to stay on for 5 to 10 minutes. So we will just keep on for some few minutes, but not many minutes. So be with us if you have the possibility. Rakesh?
Thank you, Frank. Just a quick question to both Torleif and Paul, both of you. Thank you very much for joining us on the webinar today. It's been very enlightening, being reminded of the work that valuable work that you're doing. Looking at the question of training, there appears to be continued focus on establishing training standards and certification standards for technicians, and rightly so, because ultimately they're the ones being exposed to hazards and risks at the sharp end. However, I've noticed that there's been a laissez-faire approach towards management training, because ultimately those involved in the pre-FID phases or pre-investment phases and post-investment phases tend to create the hazard loading and the risk loading that those involved in construction and operations and maintenance are actually involved in. Yet I've noticed that both within the Offshore Energy Act, the term development or the development phase is excluded from the definition on Torleif's slide, but also generally speaking across the market, it's only responsible companies who tend to recognize the importance of this and develop their management teams and decision-making teams appropriately. I'm very interested in the regulator's view as to whether, given the growth within the industry, that this more reactive approach that developers tend to take and OEMs tend to take about developing management skills is acceptable, and if so, if not, what plans do you think you might have ahead for this?
You want me to pick that up first, Rakesh?
Sure, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, okay, so in this one, this is where we do look to the oil and gas sector quite a bit, because there are recognised schemes. So we're looking for competency management systems and how that's applied across the workforce. So that's not just those at the sharp end, it's those at the managing end as well. And it needs competence across the spectrum to the right degree. So we are looking for accredited competence of all the different persons employed in the sector. So that's not a piece of work we've focused on as yet in the wind sector. We do look at the operators, as Torleif said, around electrical technicians. We want to make sure that that is appropriate. Those that are exposed to the risks in the first instance are definitely trained, competent, and those that are creating them are better informed around the decisions and the designs that they're making. So we focus in around those aspects, but competency management is high on the agenda for myself.
Yeah, if I can follow up with Paul there, I think our approach to this, because this is a well-known issue that you put on the table, Rakesh, and it's a difficult one. And what we have tried to do with our approach, this goal-oriented approach, is not to narrow it down to just the people in the sharp end or those out on the installations, but also to include those responsible for planning and those responsible for making management decisions. The problem there is then to get the relevant standards to apply to that one. You can, of course, use 9001 and so forth in order to kind of build a castle around it, but it's often made of sand. So when it comes to the practical approach, it kind of collapses. But it's a issue that we are very much aware of, and I hope that also like G+ and those organizations can kind of take those more general competencies and which are necessary into their portfolio a little bit clearer.
Thank you very much, Torleif. Frank, over to you.
Yeah, I will first of all thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and knowledge in these topics. I know that for the wind farm developers, the lawyers attending this webinar as well, the operators are waiting for the finalization of the framework and to get a better understanding of what that will be. But I think following these discussions we have had today, and also the former debate in Norway regarding this, I think it's quite clear, more or less, that what we will have in the end, and will be up and running in next year for developments. We will keep on having a collaboration discussing this topic also across nations, both between the consortium that we are a part of, Ventyr, South North Sea 2, with Parkwind, and we will have a session on the 1st of October here in Egersund, where there will be exchange of experience between Parkwind, our Belgian partners that will build the wind farm, and Havtil. So that will be good. And as I mentioned, we have and will have a close collaboration with Rakesh and Armsa Academy for promoting and also try to get especially people in the Norwegian wind farm developers and in management to attend management courses on these topics, because I think it's a lot of important things to address and to learn in this aspect. So this webinar has been recorded, and we will distribute the recording to all of the participants. And of course, you feel free to share it with your co-workers if they are not able to attend this webinar. And also feel free to approach us if you have questions about the topic that we have addressed. So I will just say thank you very much to all of you, and have a nice evening. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Cheerio. Bye-bye.